This Korean couple wanted a new child. Every couple years, my mom would bring up this story whenever, just for the sake of the memory, I guess. It makes her laugh now, but back then it was serious. I was like 6 years old when this happened, so I don't really remember much since I was only 6. All I remember was that it was truly one of the best days of my 6-year-old self. Anyways, when I was 6 years old, I was considered a really cute kid. I had big light brown eyes and light brownish red hair with a left dimple that appeared whenever I smiled. For a Korean kid, I was pretty damn cute because I had Caucasian features, so old Korean people in Koreatown would always stop to compliment me. My mother at the time, like every other 90s mom, let their kids play outside every after school or weekend. I remember I was walking by myself looking up to see if the sky had any clouds that vaguely resembled animals. This car, a nice blue car that had really dark tinted windows, pulled up next to me. The car pulled down one of its windows to reveal a middle-aged Korean woman. She smiled at me, so I waved at her. I wasn't afraid of strangers, and she looked pretty friendly. Just as I expected, she complimented me. She told me I had really pretty eyes and such a cute face. The guy that was in the driver's seat said the same. They asked me what my name was, and I told them. They asked me if I wanted ice cream. I said yes. They asked me if I wanted a toy. I said yes. So, they told me to get into their car. I got in the car. This is the part I don't really remember much about, but they took me to a toy store first and got me a Power Ranger action figure and this Beyblade. The lady and the man were really nice to me, and the lady kept saying how much I looked like her daughter. After the toy store, I remember going to the ice cream store. They kept looking at me in a weird way. They excused themselves from our table for like 10 minutes. The man had an uncomfortable look on their face when he came back. Then the lady started talking. She asked me how much I liked my parents, if they were mean to me, if I didn't want to live with them, or if they never got anything that I wanted. She told me that she could be my new mommy, then I could just have anything I wanted, even a puppy. I was really excited and I was about to say yes, until I realized that I just couldn't leave my family. It didn't feel right. I told the lady I would think about it, but I really need to get back home or else I would get in trouble. The lady hesitated, but reluctantly said okay. They drove me home, but kept taking these detours, which ended up taking us up to an hour to get to my place. They didn't even drop me off at my house. They dropped me off 2 blocks away. They let me keep the toys and I started walking home. I saw at least 5 cop cars camping outside my house, with my dad talking to one of the policemen. He spotted me and quickly ran up to me. I saw tears running down his face. I was really confused why there was a bunch of cop cars and the fact that he was crying, so I ended up crying too. It became a weird crying fest while my dad and I both sobbed in the middle of the streets while my mom started embracing me. After that was finished, I told my parents where I had been and that I was with this nice Korean couple. I told them about our conversations and how they let me have the toys. I told them how they asked me if I wanted a new mommy and daddy. The policeman took a report of what I was saying, and he made me give him the toys and asked which stores I went to. He said he was going to give it back as soon as he finished talking to the store owners. The policeman left after filing the reports. My mom and dad after that never felt the same after that experience. The policemen started coming by a couple times a week, but they never ended up finding the old couple. My dad even made me throw away the toys after this experience the next day because he said it was going to bring supposed bad luck in the family. I honestly think it's because he doesn't want to remember every time I bring out those toys. At the toy store. This happened when I was about 4 or 5 years old. I was at a rather large toy store with my dad and sister, who is 2 years older than me, so that I could pick out a birthday present for a friend of mine. My dad and I were looking at the Lego they had available, while my sister was shuffling around, bored out of her mind. At some point, she wandered away. I was looking at the box of castle sets, wishing that it was my birthday coming up, when my sister returned and tugged on my dad's arm. "What is it, sweetheart?" he asked, without looking away from the box he was holding. I think he also wished it was his birthday coming up. "There's a man." "Oh, never mind, he's gone now." My dad looked at her, putting the box back on the shelf. "What man?" he asked. "There was a man who asked if I wanted to come see his puppy. and I said I had to ask you first, but I don't know where he went. My dad took the box out of my hands and put it back on the shelf. Then he took my hand in his hand and put the other hand around my sister's shoulders. Okay, well, let's go find him, my dad exclaimed, and began leading us towards the checkouts and exits. Now, like I said, this toy store was rather large, and we were walking very fast. When we got near the checkouts, my sister pointed at a man who was just about to leave the store and said, "That's him." I could see how she recognized him from behind, as he had very long hair. It went halfway down his back. I remember having a black winter coat on, which was strange because it was a pretty warm day outside. We walked even faster until we were at the nearest checkouts, and my dad said to us, "Stay here with this nice lady for a sec," referring to the cashier. He then ran up behind the man, who was now almost out of the door, and threw his hand on his shoulder so hard I could hear it. My dad spun around to face him, then began yelling, "Where's the puppy? Where's this puppy you want to show my daughter?" People around started looking over at the commotion, and my dad continued, "You wanted to take my daughter to see her puppy. Where is it? I want to see the puppy too." The man was stammering and stuttering and trying to get away, but my dad has a firm grasp on the guy's shoulder, turning his head to where we were standing. My dad yelled to my sister, "Is this the guy who had to come see his puppy?" My sister silently nodded her head, then looked at her shoes. I think she thought she was in trouble. I didn't blame her. Our dad was yelling really loudly. "Is this puppy in your car? Where's your car? Is that over there?" He pointed out the glass door into the parking lot. "Or is that your car? Is that where your puppy you want to show my 6-year-old daughter is?" I remember thinking that if he just let this guy go, he could lead us to the puppy. Before I knew it, 3 men in yellow jackets had come. There was a word on their jackets which I couldn't read, though I knew all the letters, SECURITY. My dad let go of the men, and the yellow fellows held him instead. My sister was crying by this point. My dad walked back to us once again, taking my hand in one of his own, and putting the other around my sister's shoulders. He asked the cashier if she had a phone he could use, and she took us to the office. He called her mom to come pick us up, then assured my sister that she was not in trouble. In fact, she was in the least amount of trouble anyone has ever been in the history of the world, simply by coming and asking for his permission to see the puppy. I asked him if we were still going to see it, and he just looked at me and said, "Sorry, son, the puppy ran away." Our mom came in just a few minutes, and as we were leaving, there were police cars pulling up. "Are they going to help find the puppy?" My sister asked my mom, but she said, "No, they're here for something else." The other day, after reading through a lot of the stories here, I remembered this incident and asked my dad about it. Apparently, when the cops searched his car, they found rope, duct tape, a knife, pliers, and a hacksaw. At the guy's apartment, they found a whole shitload of child porn. My dad and sister testified at his trial, and the guy got 20 years, which means, barring other circumstances, he's out now. Edit. I want to address some of the things brought up in the comments here. I'm doing this in the post rather than reply individually to each comment, in case someone else reads this and has the same questions. 1. It was asked how the police got a warrant to search the guy's apartment. One person mentioned that he must have consented, fully aware of the items in his trunk. The thing is, I never said they were in his trunk when the police looked into his car from the outside. The rope, duct tape, and hacksaw were on his back seat. The pliers and knife were on his front seats. It was not a kitchen knife either. It was a goddamn hunting knife. So, probable cause. Second, as for not knowing they were security, there were 2 points which need to be brought up. First of all, at the time, I didn't know anything was actually wrong, other than my dad yelling. I thought we were just gonna see a puppy. So in my mind, there was no real reason for security to be there. Second, I was in kindergarten. I was not exactly what you would consider literate. Number 3, I've been scouring the web for any news articles about this incident. Keep in mind, this happened 24 years ago, a time when news was delivered on paper. My dad refused to tell me the guy's name. In fact, I think he's getting kind of annoyed with me asking about him that day. But the next time I go to the library, I'll try to find anything I can. Number 4, no, we never got a puppy afterwards. Unfortunately, my mom was always allergic to dogs, which is why we were so excited to see one. Dee Dee's Toy Shop. Hello everyone, for this story, you'll need a bit of background information. When I was a young girl, almost a child, I used to go to a private religious school. I really hated it there and try anything to stay away from school, as it was located in a small city, sadly known now for its prison and drug deals. There was a lot of small streets. Now the story begins. My sister used to tell me to be careful when I was outside with my school, especially when we came across a peculiar street known as Dee Dee's. Now, Dee Dee's was an old man who sometimes dressed up as Merlin, magic and all. His house was on the first floor of an old building, and on the other side of it was a shop. His shop was a toy shop, but I don't remember anyone going there aside from maybe one young boy. My sister told me about one of her friends, who was 18 at the time, going from her house to our school, taking Dee Dee's street. As she passed, Dee Dee followed her, talking to her, and as she wasn't answering, pulled out a knife and chased her down to the school. Now, as weird as it sounds, she never told her parents, so of course Dee Dee was known from everyone. I remember going to the pool with my school for PE, and you could have guessed it. It was across the street. It was across his street. He was standing in front of the building. I forgot to mention that. He was the only one living in this building, and has huge windows, smoking a cigarette. His eyes met mine for a second. One of my friends kept pulling my sleeves, telling me that he was looking at us. So as a brave kid as I was, I glanced at him. Sadly, when a little girl whose nickname was Snow White and with round, full cheeks, you're not really intimidating. So he started following us. He tried to talk to me, but if I remember correctly, going to his shop so I could get a toy. My teacher saw and asked him to leave, and also pushing us a bit so we could walk faster. He stopped following us but kept staring. After a couple years, I learned that the police came to get him for child abuse in his shop, but committed suicide by jumping out of the windows. I'm just glad that he's gone now. Sorry for any grammar or spelling mistakes. English isn't my main language. Pedophile at Toys R Us. I was roughly 8 or 9 years old at the time. I remember the attachable LCD screen for the PS1 had just come out, which would put this around the year 2001. My mother, my brother, and I took a little trip one afternoon to our local Toys R Us. My brother and I loved video games, so we would typically skip the rest of the store and head straight to the video game section. I guess my mom thought the store was safe enough to leave us in that area, while she looked around herself. I mean, the place was well lit. The rows of shelves were relatively low, in this section at least. The section had its own checkout counter and attendants, so we weren't alone since there were the two of us, and my brother is 2 years older than me. Anybody could have seen someone grab a kid if that happened. Though the thing is, these sick fucks tend to think premeditated, cautiously stalking and luring out their prey until they're ready to strike. A detail no parent should ever overlook. So my brother and I split up, checking out the newest games, when I noticed someone talking to my brother. The guy was definitely not an employee. He was a tall Caucasian man with a slim build, gray hair, buzz cut, and seemed to be in his 40s or 50s. They talked for a bit, and then the guy went about his business. I went up to my brother and asked him what the man wanted. My brother was quieter than usual, and simply stated that the man offered to buy him anything he wanted in the store. He left out what he had to do in return. As a kid, I guess I cannot fathom the man's true intentions, and merely thought he was genuinely going to buy the gift and leave us alone forever. The only thing at that moment running through my head was to grab the most expensive game console. So naive. Anyways, my brother knew better. He declined the man's offer. He told me to completely forget about the notion. As we walked towards the car and away from the store, I looked at the adjacent street and spotted the man. I pointed and told my mom about him. He was staring back at us as he drove away in his hoodless Jeep, possibly still reeling from almost getting caught. He took my hand. I was probably 4 or 5 years old when this happened, so I only vaguely remember it. I was on a road trip somewhere with my grandparents, an aunt and uncle. We stopped in a gift shop that was full of people, and I was the only little girl in the whole shop. I've been holding my uncle's hand almost the whole time, but let go of it to look at some stuffed animal toys of some kind. There was this guy nearby us that had been sticking very close to where we were standing at the time, while we were there the whole entire time. I remember he had a similar body build to my uncle, but I didn't really pay attention to him. I became bored of looking at the toys, not seeing one in which I really wanted to get, or really wanted to tell my family to buy. So, when a hand I thought was my uncle's reached out and took mine. It looked a lot like his hand at first, so I didn't look up until the grip started to tighten. It looked a lot like his hand at first, but I was surprised because my uncle was always careful of his strength, seeing that he was an oil field worker, especially when dealing with children. I looked up, and this man was clearly not my uncle. He was looking down, smiling at me, and trying to pull me towards him and towards the door. I didn't know him, and at the time, I didn't realize he had purposefully been trying to take me with him. I think I must have surprised him when I yanked my hand back because he lost his grip. I quickly at that moment spotted my uncle off to one side and scurried over to him. The man quickly left after that, giving me a not-so-kind look on his way out. I remember being terrified for some unknown reason when I looked up at that guy as he held my hand at that moment. It was an honest moment of panic and the absolute overpowering need to return to my uncle's side. It was instincts, I could say that. So, in conclusion, Mr. Grabby Handman, let's not meet again.